Madness vs. Machines, otherwise known as simply Madness or MM1, was the third community MVM operation launched by Potato's MVM servers. It officially launched on November 22nd of 2019 and ran all the way until July 9th of 2020. The operation featured 27 intermediates, 57 advanced, and 14 experts, adding to a grand total of 98 missions across 45 maps. This is the second part of my coverage on this operation, where previously I had explained the context of it all, including the contest, charity, and the campaign aspects of it. I also summarized my overall thoughts on it as well. In this part, I am going to go over the first half of these missions, meaning the third and last part will cover the other 49 missions of Madness. Now, to be honest, these missions are really old, and I am indeed going to be going in with the standards that are established in newer operations, so I wouldn't be too upset that most of these missions don't hold up today. As per usual, I am going to be rating each mission one by one, and it may at times get mind-numbing seeing the same letter grades over and over, but regardless, let's hop into the first 49 missions of Madness. Area 52 is up first, and we only have one mission on here. Gatebot Apocalypse is a 5-wave intermediate. Despite that name though, it only deploys a few amount of them throughout. You can't tell this mission was made for Canteen Crasher first before being resubmitted for Madness, as you can and will shoot the bots down faster than the mission paces it spawns. Somehow to the point where you're outrunning the mission itself, as it spawns a second bomb on a third wave that is 10 seconds away from wave completion. Not much else really happens though, to be honest, but it does have 3 chiefs starting out on their corresponding waves. Wave 2 has this Gatebot heavy that only casts fire rings around themselves, and yeah, their icon is absolutely crusty here. Then the wave afterwards just has a regular chief Blast Soldier by its lonesome. Then as we get to the final wave, it starts by having a chief Flare Barrage Pyro. The wave will constantly alarm for multiple bombs on the field, but by this point, the mechanic has effectively become meaningless. Then it caps off with a giant heavy boosted to 2 times of its health pool thanks to the overhealing Uber Medics it has. Overall, it's a rather boring and badly paced intermediate. Gatebot Apocalypse is D. Well, off to a good start already. Looks like we got Barren next on the list, and it appears we have 5 advanced missions. Wow. Yeah, no wonder this map hasn't been seen since Madness. Binary Breaker is a 7-wave advance. It has a pretty decent start with its first 2 waves having a rather solid composition of bots as well as good pacing. Third wave, however, is where the mission starts slowing down and the bots use phase start becoming rather bland. This wave, as well as wave 4 for that matter, resorts to spamming out commons the majority of the time, so it feels like you're barely progressing at all. Contrary to this, the mission also starts becoming a grind towards the later half. While there are many more giants to shoot down, the commons they come out with are pretty weak and hardly assist them aside from the extremely annoying blast soldiers. The final wave is where you basically go into the same motions again, and then you have the final tank dying earlier than the 3 giant deflectors that slowly trickle in. It has a good start to the mission, but the rest of the experience becomes repetitive and tedious. Binary Breaker is C. Brushfire is a 7-wave advance. It has a unique starter of steel gauntlets that progressively gets supported by medics of several varieties. Then we get to the rest of the mission, which overall kinda sucks. This is one of the more gimmick missions that we'll be going through, which as we can see with some of the bots, they are rather creative for their time. It has several chiefs, including a heavy that slowly shoots its minigun like an autocannon, a soldier shooting lasers infinitely, and another soldier that shoots all around itself. Credit where credit is due, but novelty only carries a small portion of gameplay, and the experience here isn't all that. Waves 2 and 3 are rather boring. The former being that it spams commons in massive groups for the most part, and the latter being largely dragged down by the tank supports that endlessly spawn in while the main lineup slowly spawns in as well. It's one of the 2 waves here that takes the longest to get through. The mission also throws in a few subwaves that are kind of just one and done. A good example is with wave 4 spamming rapid fire soldiers once, and then having 20 sentry guns at the front as you focus on a tank, essentially gatekeeping the area. Wave 5 for the most part can get rather stale and boring, with a rather bizarre way of ending things by having 21 giant bat scouts and a death ball, and then having the last one spawn afterwards lagging behind. Meanwhile, we have wave 6 being the second wave that takes the longest. The beginning can be rather bullshit, as it has a giant popper taking the shotgun heavy towards the hatch, while also having mid heavies that can just spawn behind you. Body block or die, that's the shtick. There's giant deflectors with shields, a massive quantity of spies that could backcap, and then a chief rocket jumper soldier named Quad Tank that shoots like a shotgun. You get to see it jump on the bridge if it lives long enough, which is kinda cool, but that's really it. The final wave plants a bomb by the hatch, forcing you to move as it spawns in a chief engineer named Archmaniac. Unlike its 2025 iteration, this one only builds sentries at its target location, but the fight overall is still pretty bad. It's basically a game of cat and mouse supplemented with babysitting, as it sends giant scouts after the bomb periodically. I can praise this mission for having unique concepts that stand out, but the gameplay here falls short over its tediousness much like the rest, and its flaws here are much more glaring. Brushfire is D. Crucial Revenge is a 6-wave advance, and it has a rather horrible start by bringing out large clusters of bots that put out a ton of projectile spam. This carries over to the second wave as well, where there's a ton of bots at once with barely any giants to be seen, and of course by the midpoint it starts using more giants. But this third wave starts by having a Chief Blast Soldier all by its lonesome, once again, but overall this third wave wasn't all too bad. However, the fourth wave is, and that's because it moves extremely slowly. Now we have very few bots being active at once, and you're waiting for giants to spawn after another. Then the pacing picks up at an extreme rate by wave 5. Here we have 5 pairs of giant soldiers spawning together with support medics, and it can all blow over in less than 2 minutes. Jeez, the pacing just bounces back and forth here. Anyway, the final wave starts with crit spam, along with pairs of giant scouts and the final tank, shoot through several banner soldiers and a few giant demos, then cap off the mission by fighting a King Heavy, a deflector heavy that penetrates players and turns you into ash. The weird design seen throughout, as well as the inconsistent pacing, has turned the experience into a rather bad one. Crucial Revenge is D. Clanker Carnage is a 7-wave advanced. It has a rather strong yet slow start to the mission by spamming a lot of commons. Otherwise, nothing too interesting happens in the first half. By the 4th wave, it will start implementing more custom bots. You'll have a chief duo comprising of a bowman named Crazed Chief Clanker that bleeds players, while the scout named Major League Omega marks players with death. A somewhat decent fight, but it does get quite annoying. And it carries over to the rest of the wave by having blast soldiers and many Persian demos. This wave also has min heavy supports, but only some of them are designated to spawn behind the player for some reason. The 5th wave then has a massive quantity of giant soldiers of varying types, the majority of which have uber medics and shotgun heavies running alongside. It does get rather repetitive here. The subsequent wave doesn't have a lot going on, but it does have plenty of scorch shot spam that can all sunlock you in place. Yeah, that's fun. And these pyros are a very prominent quality of madness missions, and while I won't be pointing out every single use case like I have with burning heater heavies, we'll definitely be seeing a lot of them throughout. The final wave here will initially have a bit of crit spam, but eventually the mission caps off with a chief crit on kill Cyclops that rapidly burst fires grenades. Yeah, the mission has custom bots and all that, but the gameplay here is rather bland. It's not too shabby though. Clanker Carnage is C. Fabrication Plan is a 6-wave advance, and it's mostly comprised of grinding through commons with a few giants sprinkled in. The pacing here is pretty bad though. A lot of the time the mission will very slowly stream in the bots, meaning there's quite a noticeable amount of time between killing one and moving on over to the next group. There is a large shift in design by the midpoint. A lot more custom bots gets added onto the 4th wave, with it ending things out with a chief escape plan soldier named Corporal Distraction. I don't know how else to describe them other than that they're bizarre. On the 5th wave at a certain point, you'll have engineers doing their war cry, coming out in squads with a Girardi sniper, and yeah, the sluggish pacing is still with us. The same wave has another chief at the end, a syringe medic shooting rockets named Not Medicine. Would have been cool to fight were it not for the battalion slapped on top of them. Final wave has you grinding through plenty of giant deflectors and commons having ubers. You'll get a beefy final tank that moves rather slowly, and then ending the mission by killing Major Cluster, a burst fire demo that deals double damage. Overall, it's a very slow mission with a lot of weird stuff happening with the second half, at times to its detriment. Fabrication Plan is D. Alright, that's enough of that. Now we'll go on over to Brugge, which has a somewhat small selection of missions here. 2 intermediates? Okay, that's not too bad. Flemish Feud is a 6-wave intermediate, and there's not much going on. However, the first wave is quite strong for spawning several soldiers on low cash throughout. Beyond that, I mean, most of it is just grinding commons with a few giants here and there, with some particular waves where you're shooting the exact same things the entire way through. The only thing that really sticks out is a massively long break after killing 2 giant heavies and a tank on the first part of wave 5. The final wave slightly scales back up to advanced, but kind of has nothing of significance, besides trios of walk-in engineers that can deploy teleporters. You'll have a chief to fight at the end who is named Colonel Landmine, a burst fire sticky demo with high projectile speed. Overall, it's a rough start to an intermediate that is otherwise fairly decent. Flemish Feud is C. Sparkbag Subroutine is a 7-wave intermediate. The vast majority of the waves here spend their time spawning several commons throughout. There's a few moments where the mission spawns several things at once, but overall the gameplay here tends to all blend together. The mission also likes to do weapon swaps or add some very small attribute to a robot that betrays your expectations. A perfect example of this are a few giant demos with shields slapped on top of them, not to indicate that they can shield charge at all, but rather as a stat stick solely for resisting damage. There are a few oddities on the second half. Wave 4 for instance has a giant soldier trio consisting of 2 rapid fires along with a charge soldier. Wave 5 then has a janky Jeremy that is essentially a chief armored jumping Sandman. The final wave here is unique in that the vast majority of the bots are demos of several varieties, ranging from Demonites to several kinds of grenade demos. And then there's a burst fire loose cannon demo named Duncan Dynamo that can mini crit boost on kill and does double damage against buildings. This finale is the only decent part of this mission because my god, the rest of the mission is just a mindless grind fest of shooting commons. Sparkbag Subroutine is D. Funeral Toll is a 7-wave advance. The pacing here is quite slow on this one, and it does drag it down heavily because the bot compositions that you see here are actually decent and are well varied. Not much that is particularly noteworthy, though the mission does frequently feature carbine snipers throughout. There's also a sort of meme subwave on wave 6 where it has giant Jarate snipers squatted with other carbine and bushwhacker snipers, and like I always say, nothing of note really happens. The final wave, however, does have something happen. It's a boss wave where it has giant stun soldiers, with a plural pertaining to each soldier's name, squatted with a chief sniper named Hip Pain that hip fires his crit boosted rifle rapidly. One thing I would say is that this is one of the boss waves of madness that starts immediately, which is a compliment because there will be a bunch of other boss waves that spawn their bosses late, and I will point them out and complain about them because they are the most egregious examples of padding. Anyway, besides that, not much else I can say besides the mission being somewhat decent. Funeral Toll is C. Now that Brugge is finished, it's time for Casino City, and we got, what, 6 missions? Yeah guys, MVM players are gambling addicts, who knew? Fork found in kitchen, I guess. Midnight Gambling is a 6-wave intermediate with not a lot to it. Most of the waves comprise of commons with a select few giants to encounter here and there. The most unique detail is that it names their boss after the cosmetics they wear, which is a nice attention to detail. For the most part anyway, because it doesn't rename the other kinds of bots. Only a couple of oddities like the mini giant variants of what you already fought before, but yes. It's just grinding through commons for 20 minutes. Sometime after the final tank arrives on the 6th wave, you'll have a Manhattan horn blaring loudly, bringing out the Chief Heavy being a Boss Mafia Heavy. It uses an Australian Tommy Slav that casts fire rings around it. Yeah, one of the intermediates of all time. Midnight Gambling is D. Cash Out Crash Out is a 7-wave advance mission with a variety of bizarre design choices seen within its subwaves. Pacing is fairly decent, but most of the time you will be constantly dealing with subwaves where the mission spawns a lot of bots at once. There are some very frustrating aspects with how the mission overwhelms the player, these including projectile spam, having mini giants with massive swarms, and pretty insane amounts of hit scan. With wave 3 especially, you deal with Spamio, who is this lock and load demo that spams pipes, and there's also soldiers spamming the entire field as well. As I mentioned before, there are bizarre elements to witness in the second half. Wave 4 is the most obvious case of this, where you just have 4 giant burst fires active at once, followed by swarms of heavies that periodically eat their snacky snacks. There's also swarms of samurai demos with cavers, before having giant punchies with banners back to back. This one in particular sucks because they straggle in towards the end of their wave. Then we got the 6th wave having swarms of scouts, except they didn't tell you that they would be carrying banners and conches. The 7th wave is a boss duo wave. The medic is referred to as the medic girlfriend, and the soldier is named the peak performance soldier. That is just a regular chief soldier, but deals 4 times the amount of damage. There is quite a bit of charms to this mission, however it does have quite a few many bad parts laid within the experience. Cash Out Crash Out is C. Gambler's Gambit is a 1-wave advance mission that goes for a very odd design choice. It has voice clips of Marasmus playing throughout the entire experience, as though he is the overarching villain of this mission.
I hope you brought your souls with you. Why? Oh, no reason. Oh, I'm going to take their souls. It's going to be so good. Score one for Marasmus!
My first impressions of it were initially positive, as at one point he does try and summon another Chief Blast Soldier for one subwave. As I engaged more with it though, the more awkward the implementation was. It's not the sole fact that they are reused, but there is a lot of dead space in between the chatter. And speaking of, the mission really isn't all that for the first 2/3 of it. Aside from a few weird subwaves, nothing wacky here really happens. Matter of fact, there are portions where very few robots are active at a time, so the experience here can be quite boring despite Marasmus' presence. The vanilla experience is broken by the last third of the mission, but just barely. And it does feature the map's sentry tank for one subwave that takes a while to kill, but once again, the gameplay here is not very thrilling. This mission ends with a boss subwave, but it is supposedly randomized between 3 chiefs. What I had in my playthrough was probably the lamest one. It is a Chief Rocket Hell, a soldier that barrages slow-moving rockets, so slow to the point that the danger they pose is practically non-existent. Yeah, I was not kidding when I said this was lame, and so was the whole mission really. Its unique quality, while admirable, falls flat on its face when the experience provided here is bland. Gambler's Gambit is D. Platinum Parade is a 4-wave advance, and it somehow manages to be a pretty good one. Bots are adequately paced and come in many varieties, with the giants here making their presence known. It has some weird subtle jokes with the name tags of a couple of robots throughout, but besides that, yeah, the custom bots here aren't really egregious at all, and they do add towards the fun gameplay. One thing that does happen, however, is that there will be at times where the giants spawn relatively late to the commons on their respective subwaves, and towards the later half the mission can be rather spammy, although given the scale of the map and the progression of the overall experience, it isn't all too bad. Pacing also still remains on the good side of things. The final wave is a bit of the same, with plenty of notable giants including steel gauntlets and booster heavies comboing with giant shields. You'll also get the map sentry tank appearing towards the end, alongside a bunch of shovel soldiers. Then the mission will cap off by having two chiefs, the first being a slug shotgun soldier named Parade Marshal Platinum, and the other is a barrage soldier named Parade Marshal Gold. Honestly, with all I've seen, this one was a pretty good experience. Great pacing and actually has quite a lot of good things to like about it. Platinum Parade is a, holy shit, a good madness mission in this economy? Sketchy Swing is an 8-wave advance. While the overall gameplay isn't much to write home about, it does have some rather peculiar design choices. Few things that stick out are floated mitten heavies combined with giant punchies having quick fixes on a 3rd wave. But then you got wave 4 with a very strange and bad way to end things off. Just one beefy tank and 60 punchies to shoot through for whatever reason. 6th wave, we have pretty much every single robot using Australian weapons and are called golden bots. Not much else here besides being a typical madness wave. Then the 7th wave starts creeping in names relating to Fallout New Vegas, but for the most part the wave is just grinding through commons. And even though there are 21 super scouts this wave, they get split across 3 of its subwaves here, the last of which will end the wave alongside bonk scouts. This wave in general just sucks because there's just tanks and plenty of commons to chew through in between. The final wave is where it now heavily references New Vegas with their namesakes. We will have once again the map sentry tank somewhere around the halfway point before finishing off with a normal chief hill on kill deflector, whose name is Edward Caesar Sallow. Besides the custom qualities, it's nothing too impressive and the mission is rather middling. Sketchy Swing is C. Vindicated Vices is a 6-wave advance. There's a few amount of custom bots to be seen, and the majority of them have stat boosts for the worst. There are speedy blaster scouts, those that already start moving at their max speed as soon as they spawn in, and the Phantom War scouts that are not only boosted, but will hit you and get a speed boost on top. Pretty ridiculous. There's also these charging caber demos that, for whatever reason, are given the large explosion effect. It does get visually noisy at certain points, but otherwise the vast majority of the playthrough is simply grinding through commons, with a gradual but slight increase in the use of giants. Pacing ranges from somewhat moderate to sluggish, with the latter happening only when you get pushed out of the front or where you awkwardly stand around just doing nothing. There's a few odd selection of bots to be seen throughout, such as a chief pistol scout seen on wave 3 called No Fly Zone that could apparently stun players that are airborne. This same wave will end with a single giant battalion with swarms of steel gauntlets, probably one of the most sinful things a mission could ever commit. 4th wave, you deal with a few named giants, a Tomislav heavy named The Dawn, and a Burstfire shotgun soldier named The Sheriff. These two will definitely appear later on. There's a 5th wave starting with a M1M2, a name given to a barrage sticky demo that occasionally has groups of pocket metas supporting them. It's a rather poor choice to have them use a Scottish resistance because if you're playing a sticky demo just like I was, they will instantly delete your stickies, which is super annoying. Not much else to wave 5 afterwards, though I will point out these alien soldiers that parachute down from spawn, which by the way are Burning Manglers, so yeah, that's fun. The final wave can only be described as a giant grind fest because holy hell does the entire wave bar consist of giants, and somehow the mission is allowed to make you waste 40 seconds of shooting down supports before the wave actually starts. The finale then caps off with the reprisal of the Dawn and the Sheriff, except they are unstoppable variants. This time, the Dawn is supported by 3 vaccinators, and the Sheriff comes out with a battalion soldier. I can respect some of the custom bot designs, but overall, the mission has plenty of bad qualities, ranging from some of its pacing issues to some of its poorly thought out design choices. Vindicated Vices is D. Oh Christ, we're finally done with the gambling map. Time for Coastrock, which many might consider an all-time classic, and we just have 2 advanced missions here. Pirate Domination is a 6-wave advance with a bit going on in that it is both challenging and annoying. The most frequent thing to encounter is commons frequently spawning in clusters. As we've seen before, this isn't really a good method of pacing as you'll instantly be faced with a lot of spam. There are plenty of custom bots to be seen, although sometimes certain attributes will be added that is never indicated with their respective icons. Like how there's Jarate snipers that are able to slow you down, and Fury powers that apparently deal less damage but then also has heal on hits. It's a very small thing, but these are game-changing attributes that shouldn't be obscure from the player. A perfect example of this is the ending of wave 3, and it is the worst part of this entire mission. It sends out a giant shield supporting Captain Laser Beam, a heater heavy that shoots multiple tracer beams that clutters your entire screen upon being targeted. The mission obscures the fact that it also heals on kill for 10% of its health, and somehow expects you not to feed the heavy on a short and very open map like Coastrock. It's a terribly unbalanced ass pull at the last minute of an otherwise decent wave, like what the hell? Moving on to the final wave, it has plenty of giant pairs, those including fan scouts that are different than usual, and direct hit soldiers with crits medics. Afterwards are 2 chiefs that come out separately. It will have this, pause for effect, giant fire resist scatter demo near the end, which is basically a burst fire demo that heals on kill. I don't know why they needed fire resist, but sure, I guess. Then it will end by having the Pirate Captain, a chief demo knight that also heals on kill. Great. Overall, this mission is rather atrocious. Lots of custom bots with hidden stat changes throughout, as well as the midpoint of the mission being terribly designed. Pirate Domination is F. Seaside Sacrifice is a 6-wave advance that does start off pretty decent with the first 2 waves. It's well paced for the bots that were sent out, though there are some slightly weird designs like a single armored salmon with 6 Ubers to end out wave 1, and a giant heavy trio with 2 out of the 3 wielding shotguns on wave 2, but overall it's not too shabby. Then we get to around the midpoint that starts taking a turn for the worse and scaling the difficulty. We got multiple pyros, a couple of which are long range and are able to suck you towards them. Then there are sticky demos that parachute high from the sky, and burst fire stickies that can kill you quickly, along with giant bonk scouts where if you don't take care of them the second their effect expires, it's basically game over. The rest of it spawns hit scan commons in massive clusters, along with a few remaining giants that will eventually have giant medics with them. Wave 4 is pretty alright, though it does have more parachuting sticky demos and giant gas pyros with massive afterburn damage that can potentially snowball with the 2 giant scouts coming together. Wave 5 is where we start seeing more giants being paired up in trios, but relative to the payout at this point, as well as the ever increasing amount of commons being spawned, it's decent enough. But holy hell, is the final wave fucking pregnant. There are so many giants and commons to grind through here, as well as plenty of mini giants. It gets really spammy here. The finale caps off with a chief soldier named the General. This one is a Ruckin' Rain with a pretty insane projectile speed, and it auto jumps and parachutes, making for a really annoying and frustrating fight, and compounding with a milk scout spam, it is a huge difficulty spike here. My thoughts on the mission? Well, the first half honestly was relatively decent, but when it comes to the second half, holy hell was it absolutely hellish to get through. Seaside Sacrifice is D. While that was certainly a selection of missions from Coastrock, now we're heading over to Cyberia with 2 advanced missions and the first expert on the list. Frozen Freaks is a 6-wave advanced mission with some good parts to it. Robots and giants are actually pretty alright considering the compositions per wave. They're also decorated with cosmetics in accordance with the map, which is a nice attention to detail, and yeah, you can probably tell I'm stretching for anything that I might consider good. This mission is rather middling in a few areas, most notably the downtime between wave spawns, so you kinda just sit there waiting a couple of times throughout, and then whenever something does happen it tends to blow over rather quickly, especially with wave 5's tank where it spawns all by itself and dies much quicker than the rest of the bots could spawn in. Side spawns are also decently used, however they all have low pushing powers, so a lot of the time you're bouncing back and forth between them. I should also say that this is one of the shortest missions to complete at around 14 minutes, and honestly I'm kinda just glad that the waves here are short and to the point. The only bad qualities I could point out is with the start of wave 3. It has 46 powers that spawn on start, but they are split between always fire and air blast powers, so soldiers can just get fucked randomly. Then wave 4 blocks off the death pit. It's not particularly bad per se, but it is weird considering that there's no chief robot in this wave. Besides all that, the final wave has 2 tanks and a chief to destroy, with a plethora of support bots. However, there is an egregious amount of padding with the first tank that it takes 20 seconds to spawn in, and an extra 40 seconds for the second one to spawn in. The chief coming afterwards is a rapid fire buff banner soldier named the Cow, and it uses a cow mangler that shoots green bison lasers and progressively shoots faster and faster based on remaining health. Overall, the mission wasn't too bad considering the bots utilized, but you can notice a bit of padding here and there. Frozen Freaks is B. Launch Sequence is another 6-wave advanced. The mission has a decent amount of giants to chew through, but the waves are much more bloated with the variety of bots. The thing this mission likes to do a lot is spawning giants by their lonesome, or spawning them fairly late, meaning that all of the fodder dies before the giants finally drop down. Side spawns are never utilized in the first 2 waves, and once you do see them on wave 3, they don't take a lot of effort to hold down, which isn't too bad, but considering the vast majority of the mission is a grind fest, as you get through several fodder subwaves, it does get very tiring. The finale is a bit of a slow grind. A very little amount of commons spawn in as the giant soldiers spawn from both sides one at a time, one after another. Tanks are pretty boring here, and the last subwave has fan scouts spawning with giant combos and super scouts, and you're guaranteed to wait out for the last super scout before finishing the mission. Other than that, it's a fairly generic mission. Launch Sequence is C. Northern Lights is a 5-wave expert, and it is the first expert mission we'll cover. This is another one of those gimmick missions, except this one is pretty egregious in this regard. The biggest example is it constantly starting each wave off with a tank that progressively increases in count over time. This subwave structure is going to be repeated by these kinds of missions over the course of the campaign, and I'm only going to mention this once, but I find the subway style to be very tedious and boring, serving nothing more than just damage checks and exists solely to waste your time. And these tanks are the most notorious examples, as simply not having enough DPS allows the tank barricade to be blown up, drastically affecting the experience. Besides that, the mission is fairly gimmicky as I mentioned before. Robots use various weapons with differing attributes, some of which are particularly quirky. They're also fairly hidden as well, and you would only know they have stat changes if you look into the pot file itself or get killed by the bots themselves. Support bots here, however, are the biggest offenders. Sniper's Cannon will explosive headshot, and there are ambassador spies at one point. By the way, the mission completely fails to denote that these two bots are crit boosted on the wave bar. And speaking of wave bar, you will always see crit boosted bots every single wave. And considering that they have crit boosted hit scan on the first wave, and they give you extra money just to pay for it, you really are just incentivized to get it. A great example of the term crit tax. The waves in this expert are very meticulously structured in that you don't really see a lot of robots active. First half is a very prime example of this, where the bots themselves are exceptionally strong relative to the cache around this point. It is by no means a bad idea, but it can at times make the experience rather boring, especially with how long the map layout is. When you get to the second half, you do see the mission switching towards the more traditional NVM structure. Fourth wave though is rather annoying considering that they use triple banners throughout and obscuring what kind of robot they are. The commons being burst fire demos and the giants later on being shotgun heavies. There are also expert pistol scouts, and everybody loves hit scan bots on high skill level. The fifth wave overall is really tame. Aside from the tank subwave in the beginning having a tiny clown tank and then a normal one afterwards, which by the way is a thing that every mission does with this exact same type of subwave structure. There's a chief deflector at the end that pushes away players with its knockback rage, and it regenerates health at a high rate, so it's just a bullet sponge boss. The final wave would deploy a sticky tank, which is the final tank despite not having a skin, but whatever. This is also a boring segment considering it's the only thing you shoot at aside from the obligatory bomb support. The chief you fight at the end is a giant sniper named Orbital Strike that, despite whatever their icon indicates, slowly shoots out nukes at the players. It's rather hard to telegraph their attacks, and the projectile moves way too fast for you to move at the time it's launched. And of course, the mission unnecessarily brings in backup soldiers that trickle in every so often, so at times this wave can be frustrating. For what the expert had going for it, has a very interesting approach to his wave designs that I can commend it for, but the gameplay here can be a little repetitious, and there's plenty of areas where not much is really going on. Northern Lights is C. Next, moving over to Derelict, we got 2 advanced and 3 intermediates. This is the only map in Madness with the highest number of intermediates, but why are we attracting newbies to a Warzone map? Spade Segregation is a 6-wave intermediate. There's not a lot going on here, just your typical grindfest with some giants sprinkled in. The one thing to know here is the 3rd wave hitting you with a difficulty spike out of nowhere, largely due to the mini giant barrage soldiers with conch soldiers, except these soldiers don't have reduced projectile speed, so they're extremely oppressive. There are a few other custom bots the mission deploys, the most notable being a slow walking soda popper scout with a pretty big magazine that gets a mini crit boost on kill, and is referred to as Hyper Gunner. And past them, there will be giants that are weaker variants of it, but by far the worst subwave of this mission belongs to wave 4, and it's at the end. You have to wait for a very long time on wave 4 just to kill off the 2 remaining fan super scouts. It takes an entire minute on this subwave with just bowman support, and I have no idea why. The final wave doesn't have much of anything despite these several giants on the wave bar, and it will end with a giant rapid fire and a deflector appearing on both sides with a bunch of crits and uber medics respectively. Yeah, it's quite a bit of a snooze fest with this one, but I could say that for every Madness intermediate. Spade Segregation is D. Metallic Breakthrough is another 6-wave intermediate. Guess what? The mission doesn't have a lot to it, but with a few oddities along the way. Quite a fair number of scattergun scouts in wave 2, but the mission forgets to capitalize their names. One very annoying thing this mission would do though is infinitely spawn supports. It'll start happening by the 4th wave where a single pair of fan scouts spawn in non-stop, then the 5th wave would do it for 3 minutes, as the wave very slowly trickles in giants. Jesus Christ. The final wave has nothing happening until towards the end, where it is basically a tank and a giant duo split between 2 subwaves, the second of which the giants are crit boosted. Metallic Breakthrough is D. Defragmentation is, once again, another 6-wave intermediate, and once more you grind through commons and very few monster giants. Fork Fountain Kitchen I guess, but my god this mission featured quite a bit of score shot spam. It starts with a lot of it on the first ever subwave, and then proceeding to use them later somewhere around the midpoint. Besides that, you get a chief that's just a typical rapid fire soldier at the start of wave 5, and then on a final wave you get a giant bowman getting their ubers and crits throughout, and then a giant deflector to cap it off, which I think dies in like 2 seconds. Yeah. Defragmentation is D. Blast Bevy is a 6-wave advance mission. Oh, thank god. Surely something nope, it's just common grindfest. Other than that, you do get a few oddities here and there. Wave 2 having a single tank that moves at a rather slower rate, and then getting to the end of Wave 5 is where the mission suddenly starts becoming weird. The last 3 tanks here spawn back to back along with a very plain burst demo chief. The final wave has a somewhat interesting start, with pairs of giant black boxes and a few mini giants, but then it falls back to being a common grindfest. The giant brass beast regen pair is over before you know it, and the mission ends by featuring the regen crits, a slow firing sergeant crits variant, firing 3 rockets at a time with a black box, but they can only regenerate health per second rather than hitting players. This mission may offer a bit more compared to the intermediates, but yet again, it is a bland and uninteresting experience. Blast Bevy is D. Waterway Wringout is a 3-wave advance. Oh, finally, a mission that does something different. And let me begin by telling you how terrible it is. This mission, very bizarrely, has a midway break 2 minutes into the mission. It is also the only break in the entire mission, and it happens after you kill a chief beekeeper pyro. Now, imagine my frustration in having to witness this cutscene over and over again, having to reset this run a couple of times because the first wave is absolutely horrendous. Every single robot here has crowd control effects and loves spamming the entire field with flares and scorch shots throughout, and we all know how terrible the flanking is with this map. At least there's a timer on the bomb, but that's no excuse for the mission to bring out the worst designed subwave 3 minutes in. Here we've got giant blast soldiers shooting you sky high, all the while sending out super scouts that are allowed to slip past thanks to, once again, the knockback as well as the flanking. More slowdowns from the giant Natashas, and then capping off by setting everyone on fire with burning Mangler soldiers. Even though the mission completely dishes crowd control after this, thank god, it doesn't get better. Plenty of commons shooting many projectiles throughout, and it also has plenty of shortstop scouts that can just freely run around. You'll come across unique giant black boxes that shoot one at a time very slowly, and they are still allowed to heal a third of their health, so that's fun. The rest of the wave is alright to say the least, that is, until you deal with the boosting blaster, a buff soldier that crit boosts on kill, all the while boosting a bunch of heavies and shortstop scouts. A pretty massive difficulty spike to throw in at the last minute. The third and last wave has quite an incessant use of rapid fire and burst fire robots. I mean, seriously, it is absolutely everywhere on this wave, and it can become hit scan hell when the swarms of deflectors spawn in. The final subwave will have the ultimate heavy weapons, a heavy that crit boosts on kill, heals on kill, deflects, casts a firing. I mean, yeah, it is the ultimate heavy weapons after all. Oh man, yeah, this mission is genuinely terrible. My only compliment to the mission is that it has a well-established theme across its waves, but it sure as hell compromised a lot of the enjoyment to getting there. Waterway Wringout is F. Christ, that's finally it for Derelict. Now it's Dockyard, and we have an intermediate and an expert to get through. Technophobia is a 7-wave intermediate, and right off the bat, it starts with, well, crit bat scouts. Get it? Oh, this mission for the most part is chewing through a common spam and getting to the few giants. Some of the things I have noticed include the majority of giants preferring to spawn from the sides rather than the middle. And the other, and perhaps the most excruciating aspect, is the pacing here. Too many waves and subwaves here have you waiting for a long while for things to end. And most of the bots spawn in low frequencies at a time. Wave bars also get progressively fatter and fatter, but much like any other intermediates, the gameplay here is quite shallow. Some weird stuff in here include an entire subwave of 3 tanks back to back that are easy to kill. Then the bomb, for whatever reason, starts having a timer by wave 3, which to be honest serves zero purpose and screws over with the pacing even further. Some bots to highlight here include this super blast soldier somewhere halfway that is just a blast soldier chief that shotgun blasts his rockets. Then there's these patriotic pushers, which are burst fire blast soldiers with a yellow hat. They appear once at the beginning, later get used with a giant medic, and then later on as part of the final wave. This final wave in particular spawns 3 tanks back to back in a train formation, then it's 3 patriotic pushers back to back, and the super blast soldier returns as the super chief blast soldier, with the major differences being that it reloads faster and it has cosmetics to boot. Despite the interesting qualities, still a boring intermediate to sit through. Technophobia is C. Pier Pressure is a 7-wave expert mission. The biggest aspect of this mission are its commons frequently spawning in large clusters. Giants here also frequently spawn in squads that includes medics as well. This often results in a lot of projectile spam throughout the waves that easily becomes a nothing burger with AoE burst damage. Classes like Sticky Demo and Sniper can easily clear out the groups, and without the mission deviating much from this style, it hurts the overall pacing of the mission when these two are allowed to dominate freely. But even without them, there are still an excruciating amount of downtimes in the experience as well as nothing burger subwaves. waves. The mission rarely spawns Gatebots on the right side to challenge players, so a majority of the time is spent on the main path. And there are a lack of interesting elements across the 6 waves, so I'm skipping straight over to the final wave. This finale pits you against 2 tanks spawning separately, with the final one ambushing from behind later on. There are also giant heal on kill deflectors and barrage soldiers on both sides, and you gotta kill 9 of each one. This is the only real challenge the mission presents you, because the flood of common supports as well as medics including poppers will all make for an onslaught that pushes you quite a fair bit. Besides all that, the mission spends 90% of the experience being an advanced mission with poor pacing, and the 10% being somewhat tolerable but also grindy. Pier Pressure is B. Alright, next is Doppler, an all-time classic that has 4 missions including an expert here. Rusty Sound Wave is a 6-wave intermediate, where the first wave pits you in the map's infamous spiral layout with 2 lanes reaching the hatch. Despite that, the mission only ever uses 1 lane, with the occasional bomb support that sometimes spawns on the other lane. Besides that, the overall gameplay here doesn't offer much, just your typical experience with the Madness mission. Only thing you can fault the mission for is with some of the particular giants awkwardly utilized where they spawn far from where the bomb is. The one weird characteristic of this mission is with the giant soldiers. Their heads are scaled to a much bigger size, and some of them later on will have the animations boosted. Also, I know I just said this was mission specific, but this is pretty much a trademark of the creators, so they'll show up every now and again. The final wave ends with several giants, though they are not Gatebots, so they just wrap around from the bottom floor towards the gate and head upstairs, so this generally becomes an annoying experience. The chief at the end comes with a giant medic, slightly altered to have more health but no regeneration, and the chief in question is a chief rapid fire buff soldier. Mission overall isn't too bad, just fine. Rusty Sound Wave is C. Spiral Slaughter is a 6-wave advance, starting you off in the first area for its first 2 waves and has 2 bombs simultaneously active at once. The idea here is obviously to have split teams defending both lanes, and as I'm saying this, you're probably expecting this mission to be peak gaming. However, it is not. Both of the bombs can reset here, and whenever they do so, it's back to square one, and with this confusing layout, you're not exactly sure where to defend next. Not only that, you can have both bombs on a single lane, so every single bot funnels into them, so the split defense doesn't really work after a while. The 2 waves here are kind of just they're just common spam sprinkled with some giants. The second wave is the most egregious though, where you kill the only 2 giant soldiers here early and you're stuck fighting crit demos and demo knights including samurais for quite a long while. Besides the beginning of this mission being rough, the rest of the experience has you spending 2 waves in each stage of the map, up until the last 2 where you're at the last area. It's a nice change in pacing actually, and these waves are pretty decent and actually do ramp up the difficulty quite nicely with more giants being utilized. A few things standing out include these rocket jumper supports on wave 4, and then a chief heavy at the start of the finale being this brass beast heavy named Heal V Weapons guy, and as you can probably infer, it heals on hit and on kill. The rest of this finale has giant demos and soldiers spawning constantly on both sides, followed by a single Gatebot Colonel Barrage with a giant crits medic, and then closing out with giant heater combos that burn you on hit. Cool. Anyway, if the beginning was more refined, I would have liked this mission a lot more, but you know what? It is indeed one of the better ones. Spiral Slaughter is B. Endothermic Espionage is an 8-wave advance that unlocks each stage one after another until the 3rd wave. The way this mission plays in the first area is spawning bots 1 lane at a time and then alternating in between. This isn't really the best approach because what happens here is that the bots will come to drop off points to move on over to the other side, which does throw you off at times, especially when the bomb resets. And funnily enough, the bots can take fall damage when they drop off from the lighter colored lane. Anyway, beyond the first wave, there isn't a lot to complain about when it comes to gameplay. There are some very weird design choices to nitpick, such as the chief robots route, where whenever they're featured, they have the boss health bar and a big health pool, but their names fail to classify them as chiefs or have unique names. But I do have to commend some of the things that this mission has. For one, it features tanks on Doppler. Wait, tanks on a Gatebot map? How could that be? Well, it turns out the tanks are just giant soldiers with inflated health pools that are completely defenseless and do nothing but capture gates and carry the bomb. Drop database devastation when shamelessly steal these 6 years later. No, but seriously, they are such a neat and charming concept, and despite them being easily blockable in this old iteration, they are cool novelties that still remain fun to shoot at. Another weird thing to commend this mission for having fun with was having one of the waves end instantly, being locked behind an Epic Game Store exclusive. This was a commentary on the fact that Epic Games would make deals with publishers to make games exclusively available on their storefront for a limited time, which screwed over every other PC storefront. They don't do it anymore, but yeah, it was a very shitty thing to do back then. The final wave is a bit of a grindfest though. A plethora of giants including soldiers in major leagues and high counts, as well as having to deal with backup soldiers and Natasha heavy supports spawning infrequently. For the most part, you're kind of just shooting the same things over and over without much build up, but despite all that, there are some things with this mission that are worth praising. If you can't get past the slow parts of it, you can have a good time here. Endothermic Espionage is A. Nuclear Winter is a 5-wave expert, unlocking each stage of the... yeah, you already know how this goes. It starts off strong, but in a rather good way by pushing both lanes with a bunch of commons and giant soldiers having medics. But then it transitions into a very weak segment, having swarms of mitten heavies followed by super scouts trickling in, and then having demonites with ubers having support that comes in way too late. Beyond that, the next two waves don't really do much here, although that is fair considering I was running a strong team at the time. What I can say with the whole mission is that the pacing here is maintained at a very steady rate, and it's also quite good at varying its wave compositions. What you do start to notice, however, is the repetition of how the waves end. Giants being paired with medics and having swarms with infinite supports. It does this for pretty much most of the waves here. Wave 4, however, does stick out the most for being different. It has one sub-wave where the mission purposefully baits you into targeting the giant trio of vaccinator punchy combos just so it can spawn engineers behind you. But it also has an ending sub-wave that separates itself apart by being straight up annoying. It has giant black boxes squatted with steel gauntlets, which is kind of okay, but rather boring in the late stage of an expert. The sub-wave also has milk and gas support spawning infinitely, which is the annoying part, and the gas pyros here can freely air blast you, so soldiers can just get fucked. The final wave will have a painful start of fan scout swarms, along with two colonel barrages that for some reason have a mix of uber and blast medics with only one of the latter for some reason. The rest of it has you grinding through several commons, extending towards the infinite supports here. You'll also get a giant battalion soldier uber combo, which is just a repeat of a blast soldier combo from the prior wave. Then at the end are burst fire demos, 2 at a time with 1 uber per pairing. While the mission tends to be repetitive and has a few rather bad segments, I do say that I had plenty of fun getting through this expert. Nuclear Winter is B. 4 missions done for Doppler, and now comes Downpour. We have 3 missions of separate difficulties. Flash Flood Flurry is a 7-wave intermediate. The mission has some pretty good pacing. Plenty of giants to shoot down that do mix well with the commons they're featured with. With some particular waves, they do end out with rain pouring down from the sky, and having the fog limit visibility, which is a nice touch. There are some sour spots though. Wave 2 in particular is not too great. It starts with a single giant heavy that dies really quick, followed by giant shiv snipers and a beefy tank. These two are threats that feel like nothing burgers in practice, and this subwave overall is muddied by the constant scorch shot spam by the pyro supports, adding crowd control into the mix. As you can probably guess, the mission features a lot of custom bots. For the most part, the mission tends to be rather goofy with it, like having punchies cast fire ring around themselves, including giant variants, as well as these weird pyro variants called cozy campfires that fire both their flamethrower and flare gun simultaneously. Though the ones I like to highlight here are the custom soldiers. They're honestly super annoying with their rockets that stun and air blast you, but these soldiers are named Soggy Soldiers. Dude, my name is featured in this mission. How awesome is that? Anyway, the final wave has you grinding robots for a bit, till you get to the end as a chief variant of the custom pyros, being the coziest campfire of all. The chief isn't too terrible, but there is quite a lot of spam. Besides all that, the mission is, I'd say, somewhat decent. Flash Flood Flurry is C. Storm Surge is a 6-wave advance. It's a rather grindy one, and most of the commons you fight throughout tend to repeat themselves. The most notable of which are the heavies here, and every single common heavy you deal with are destined to use stock miniguns. No deflectors or heaters here. Another bot that appears a lot are the custom nail gunner scouts that rapidly shoot out syringes. For the most part, these guys are pure memes and don't really do much besides being sponges. And much like the intermediate here, there will be at times be fire ring heavies, despite using the heater heavy icon, which kinda points to an extremely weird detail about this mission, being that it solely uses icons from the base game rather than custom unique ones. Biggest example of this are the giant flare pyros, except they are not only flare pyros, but they are shotgun pyros, burst firing a large amount of flares against players. Anyway, the mission itself is grinding as I said before. Nothing too much of interest really happens besides a beefy tank that appears in wave 2 once again, funnily enough. However, I will point out that for whatever reason, the mission steadily increases the amount of bombs active in the second half. They aren't timed either and is overall completely pointless since every bot moves onto the same lane. However, when it comes to the final wave, they not only have 4 bombs, not 5, but 6 bombs active at once. And then only some of them are timed? This has to be some sort of weird gag. Aside from that, the finale features a bit of everything from the prior waves, then grinding to a slow halt as the last few main commons spawn, having giant deflectors with giant poppers, which are apparently quick heals that pop for only a short duration, and then having a burst fire demo along with a giant quick heal. It's a pretty lame finale that kinda just drags on for far too long. There's a lot of repetitiveness with this mission, as well as many segments that were a chore to get through. Storm Surge is D. Alluvion is a 6-wave expert. Where the prior missions use the map's Downpour effect, this one doesn't use it at all. That's not to say that the mission suffers from that missing feature alone, as there are other things worth criticizing it for. This expert pretty much plays like an advanced with low payout. The bot compositions lack any sense of nuance and aren't much of interest, much like the other experts on the list. Granted, the pacing here is pretty alright, and we are indeed rolling through it with a heavy shield, but yeah. Only few subwaves that were particularly challenging was one of them in Wave 2, where it has giant pyros and pairs with giant knights active at once, and then there's also giant furies that do push a fair bit with Ubers and a couple of banner soldiers. Only bots to take note of include this icon, where the mission gaslights you into thinking they're charge and charge rammer demos, only to then spawn regular demos with a tide turner instead. Then there's also weird names that pop up at times, most notably the armored quick fix with 2 C's, and fish scouts named something fishy in the finale. Speaking of, this final wave has nothing exciting. You've got the classic giant deflectors with poppers, giant bonk scouts that are easy to body block, then there's giant pyros that heal on kill, and we all know how easy they are to deal with at this stage of the mission. Last tank spawns, then is giant demos and soldiers that are both burst fire variants. Yeah, this expert is pretty boring. It doesn't do anything offensive, but it's rather unremarkable. Alluvion is D. Downpour is down. Alright, what's next? Oh, alright guys, it's medieval time. Look, I know this video has been going through each map one by one, but here is where I'm going to lump every single medieval mission from the other maps here and cover them all back to back right now. I've mentioned about these missions in the first part as well as in a separate video, but just as a reminder that medieval missions suck, and the madness missions are notoriously terrible. All of the depth in the gameplay is effectively removed here. It's repetitive shooting at the things without being threatened over and over again, and it's super tedious engaging in melee, constantly changing the next target because the mission spawns so little boss at a time and they hardly group together. We're gonna start with Frostwind, which is notorious for its extremely open layout, compounding the issues that I mentioned earlier. Wicked Wizardry is a 7-wave intermediate. Yeah, there's not much to the mission on screen. For the most part, you're kind of just going through the same bot compositions of melee fodder, supplemented with a few giants using melee weapons here and there. There's a chief pyro bot on wave 5 named Archmage's Apprentice, but they only swing their axe, so it's easy pickings for snipers. Only 2 tanks are ever utilized in this mission, spawning in separate waves, but are both utilized to end them, and it's, oh my god, it's just so boring, seriously. The 7th wave is at least worth mentioning somewhat. We have more flare gun pyros with the giants using scorch shots this time, kill off giant axe pyros with crits kriegs, then we get to the chief scorch shot pyro with their own giant crits krieg, and their name is Archmage Phlogiston. That's it. I don't really have much to say about this mission. Wicked Wizardry is F. Fiefdom Fiasco is a 6-wave advanced medieval mission. Let me tell you how this goes down. Melee fodder after melee fodder, flare pyros every once in a while, and blue rectangles rolling in with barely any support. This mission allows the bomb to reset after a while, which is to compensate for the extra pushing power, but these first 2 waves are absolutely annoying as hell. They send scout supports that exist solely to grab the bomb, so you're constantly forced to sit on the bomb like a little bitch. But then there are these Fanowar scouts, and in the mission's infinite wisdom, they increase their move speed. So much that you literally cannot catch up to them even with the bomb unless they taunt. Jesus fucking Christ. Besides that, the mission only ever starts taking itself seriously on wave 5, but in here, they just constantly start spamming arrows with these mini giant bowmen and crossbow medics, and they're being slowly streamed in for the next 2 minutes. And then comes giant demos that get to use loose cannons now. Honestly, they're not too bad and kind of a joke even with the giant crits, but my god, this entire segment is just a mindless grind fest. The final wave, okay, so you fight giant scorch shots with fodder to waste your time, have 2 major leaks die off screen at the time of typing the script, then a tank with no final skin, capping off with a chief medic pocketing a chief heavy that completely defies all medieval logic and rules and just straight up uses a minigun. Yeah, I don't know dude, this mission is just an entire grindfest where nothing happens until the last 2 waves. Fiefdom Fiasco is F. The next map, or medieval map rather, is Hillside, and it just has 1 mission here. Outdated Processing is a 6-wave advanced medieval mission. A little fun fact to know is that this mission in this map could have been a part of Canteen Crasher. However, it was taken out due to some weird contract exploit relating to the tank in the gate of the map, and I'm not exactly sure how that works. Compared to Frostwind, this map is a little more confined, so you spend less time chasing the boss. This, however, is balanced out by the bad qualities of both the map and the mission that somehow makes the experience a lot worse. The boss take forever to start dropping in this map, so you just sit there waiting several seconds for the mission to actually start. Tank spawn is also extremely far away from the barricade, and the barricade is non-solid, so any sniper or medic can just take pot shots at it immediately. There are also flank spawns, but they are so egregiously spaced away from the front and just allows the boss to run up behind you. Like seriously, you wouldn't know that these spawns on the left and right are where the robots could spawn from. This map also has a gate. It's not too bad of an idea, but it has this invisible wall for them for obvious reasons. Although what can happen is someone getting crushed under it, and you will get insta-killed rather than taking damage over time. Unfortunately, I don't have much to comment on the back half of the map, as most of my time on the mission was spent at the front. Speaking of, the mission mainly comprises of melee bots, and there are no ranged bots to be seen. Oh my god. And despite how confined the map is, there can often be times where nothing is happening, and there's barely any robots to be seen on the field. Few things worth pointing out are the boss having random stat changes that I can't be bothered to point out individually, but you do get these Caber demo supports with 35 health, and are called tactical suicide demos, and just okay. Final wave, final tank, then you get to the chief bushwhacker sniper named the King of Australia, and it's got giant soldiers squatted alongside. Kill them fast, and the mission ends in a whimper. Nothing happens until the end, with the occasional flanking by the map's atrocious spawns. Outdated processing is F. And now the other medieval map is Winterbridge. It's far more linear and long-winded with its 3 stages compared to the other maps, but I would still say this is the best among the worst. Anyway, there's only 2 more medieval missions to cover here. Frozen Fortitude is a 6-wave intermediate on Winterbridge. You know how the song and dance goes. Melee bots with very few range bots. At this point, we're basically copying each other's homework. Now, allow me to say that this actually has the best start out of the 5 medieval missions. The bots here are actually decently composed, all things considered, and the mission is doing more than just weapon swaps. But considering that we're still in medieval MVM's wild ride, there are still some grind fests within this mission, and nothing really happens until the last 2 waves. You'll get this one giant punchy with a boss health bar that is just a giant Elite Knight heavy, and the 5th wave does have 2 giants with ranged weapons, the notable of which is a pyro that uses the Dragon's Fury. Besides that, not much else to this 5th wave. The final wave though starts with super sword scouts wasting your time. You get this chief soldier at the end named White Knight that is surprisingly interesting. They act passively for the first half while sending several goons at you. Then when the tank comes out, they send out even more goons, which for the rest of the wave are just Zatuichi Crusader soldiers. They also holster their banner and starts using a cow mangler, firing slowly with double the damage and burns you on hit. The last phase, however, unfortunately runs this mission back to the ground. They will then come at you swinging with their half Zatuichi, which by the way makes them a kill-on-kill boss, all the while shitting out more Crusader soldiers that will eventually bring out buff banners. This is essentially snowballing, which absolutely does not belong in an intermediate. At the very least, it wasn't an absolute bore like some of the other medieval missions, but Christ. Frozen Fortitude is F. Rusted Retribution is a 6-wave advanced medieval mission, and finally, we have a medieval mission where stuff actually happens, although that is large in part due to the mission being the hardest out of the 5. The bots are actually something to take seriously, and much more ranged weapons are being utilized, including gas cans to just straight up rocket launchers. In doing this, however, it has a large amount of badly designed bots. These include the armor giants that can get fucked. These sword scouts take way less crit damage and somehow just take in regular damage from anything else. Then there are these Demo Knights that will take reduced damage, but it's only from melee damage. Like, what? Or how about this? Crit resistant flare pyros that take only 20% of it and are mini giants. Some robots will also seem to change attributes on the fly, which includes the chief pyro at the end of wave 2. Here they use various flare guns, including a scorch shot that they will randomly pull out and completely spam the entire field with. And then at certain points they can just spam gas even though they're called Flare Master. 5th wave has a rather unique start. Here is a medic named Dr. Doomkoff that pockets various giants, although the ones that they uber are rather shit and mostly just waste your time. Then after all the giants die, they just run with a bomb all the while swinging their uber saw. Yeah, this boss actually kinda sucks. And so does this entire wave for that matter. Swarms of demos that charge around blindly so your screen constantly shakes violently and they barely do anything but be annoying. Followed by more bots to grind, including sticky demos and a single giant heater capping it off. To end the mission is a boss wave that starts immediately with 0 support. For some reason the mission starts at the 2nd stage of the map rather than the 3rd one, and everybody warps to spawn for this fact, even though you can just walk to the 3rd stage freely, so all the more confusing wave to begin with. The sniper chief is named Mundi Gone Mad, and they periodically switch between weapons with no way to telegraph them. The most notable weapons include Slow Gerati, great, and their SMG that fires a barrage of rockets guaranteeing a kill against any players nearby because they once again pull it out randomly, quickly, all the while being able to auto jump with it. It's not a fun boss, and it's a rather janky one too. While this mission certainly has a bite to it with stuff going on, it's all hampered by the custom bot designs and the mission proceeding to take a turn for the worse beyond the first half. Rusted Retribution is F. So in conclusion, medieval missions fucking suck, and it's definitely not biased talking here. Now let's return to reality with Gold Pit, and we just have one intermediate and one advanced to get through. Exciting Excavation is a 7-wave intermediate. My parting advice to every mission maker out there is not to use the term exciting and intermediate within the same sentence. There are commons and you grind through them, much like the rest of the Madness missions. However, this mission frequently has them using melees, and there isn't a single wave where you haven't grinded down a subway full of melee fodder that are completely defenseless. The mission does have custom bots aside from the melee fodder, though the only ones worth highlighting are the 2 Blast Soldier variants. These are the Charged Blast Soldiers and the Blast Buff Soldiers. And the most annoying thing is that these two share the same icon as the standard variant, so you'll never guess which one gets deployed. Then there's also a chief demo to start wave 6. They are called Gold Digger Godbrand, and their quickie launcher shoots cabers that lingers on the ground while also exploding on contact. Final wave, not much really happens aside from having custom Blast Soldiers, of which only the charged variants appears here. Then it'll end with 3 Kernel Barrages, the first of which doesn't have Uber Medics, the second one gets 3 pocketing it, and the third one gets 5. Was the excavation exciting? I think not. Exciting excavation is D. Gold Rush is a 6-wave advanced. A large percent of the commons here get pushed out in large groups with rather long wait between, so already we have moments of awkward pacing. There are also difficulty spikes that do show up every now and then, but they tend to be handled sluggishly or simply fall flat on their faces. Giant medics get used a lot more frequently, as well as shield variants. They're not the worst encounters, but considering how early they come in and how easy it is to kill the large groups of fodder, they tend to be rather boring. Around the midpoint, they do introduce vaccinators that are always paired with bowmen, and paired with giant soldiers twice in a row, and then never again. I'm honestly not sure why the first occurrence only had to be blast vaccinators, but I guess they were trying to make a pun because their subwave also has blast soldiers. The final wave is a boss wave with 30 seconds of padding. Jesus Christ. The Chief Pyro is named Golden Commander, and it uses an Australian flamethrower. Making them a Gatebot here means the finale is completely trivial, since it only ever attacks at close range and reflex makes it a punching bag a majority of the time. This is also the only ever occurrence of gold in this mission, because everything else is stale and boring, unfortunately. Gold Rush is D. The next map is Hanami, with once again another intermediate and advanced get through. Yeah, we won't be spending too much time on the next several maps for a while. Drop Zone is an 8-wave intermediate. One significant thing I'll say about this mission is that it has pacing issues, especially with the start of wave 1, because my god, you just wait forever for the giant SMGs to get churned out. But besides that, I can say the bot compositions here are somewhat decent. It does repeat the starting tank subwave a couple of times, which does become rather repetitive. There's a few custom mission supports worth pointing out. These include the engineer bots. These include those that shoot rescue rangers as snipers, as well as mini-sentry engineers that spawn behind, which, okay, look, I can't say much about these particular engineers that appear throughout the campaign, but the thing with these engineers is that the announcer never calls out engineers like these, so they just deploy mini-sentries for free, and it's annoying. You'll get to wave 6 where it has a Mimi start, where Punchy comes out, gets killed, and the herd gets all mad as they swarm out. As charming as this wave is, it's rather repetitive overall and just goes for way too long. The final wave is just the boss wave, and you wait 20 seconds for the boss to spawn. They are a Chief Samurai demo simply called John Yakuza. I don't think they have honor bound, but yeah, it's just a punchy bag at this point. The mission overall is relatively slow, but it does have some interesting things to it that makes it stand out somewhat. Drop Zone is C. Blast Away is a 7-wave advanced. One of the most tedious things the mission puts you through is killing teleporter engineers in the first half. They don't spawn too often, but the map has them spread far apart from the main path, so you always have to be on standby. Besides that, the mission is slow just like the intermediate, couple of nothing burger subwaves here and there, and a few waves fall into repetition because it has the same bot composition spread across multiple subwaves. It also repeats an ending subwave like 2 times, where it spams soldiers from the flank spawn to ambush players. The few custom bots here include giant nuke demos, a chief soldier on wave 5 named the Rising Sun that appears to just be a big rock burst fire. Final wave, you get a few tanks, and every single giant medic is an Uber variant that builds up Ubers super fast in between charges, and they will pocket giant flogs that are always crit boosted to cap off the mission. Not much goes on here, to be honest. Blast Away is D. Up next is Hideout, 1 intermediate and 1 expert this time. Covert Compromise is a 6-wave intermediate. I will tell you right now that nothing significant happens in this mission. Grind through commons with a few giants sprinkled here and there. Couple of times where the bots spawn faster than the giants they come with, so pushes are often hampered here. There are a couple of custom bots, though they have weapon swaps for the most part, and the mission classifies its Mangler soldiers as soldier gourd bots for whatever reason. I can't tell you much about the final wave because it's basically the same thing over and over again, but you do get this unique Big Rock Burstfire soldier at the end. It's not crit boosted, rather it is a Burstfire that crits on kill for 6 seconds, if it even kills anything at this point. And it's not even a chief, like what the hell are we doing here? Anyway, mission is boring, simple as. Covert Compromise is D. Autonomous Annihilation is a 5-wave expert. Here is a mission where something does happen, but in the worst way possible. The monkey's paw is curled and we start with $10, just so we can recall after collecting credits during the wave. Now as you can imagine with what's coming up, my team went triple heavy in this mission with a medic due to the stingy payout. Wow, just as the expert document predicted and likely thrown out during judging. No, but seriously, it's like the mission begs you to do so because it sends out giant black boxes one by one on the first ever subwave of the mission. And yes, this wave sends out mega heals afterwards that incentivizes burst damage, but there's no sweat in just waiting them out. There's not much going on with wave 2, but it does have triple banner support sprinkled throughout. Pyros get squatted in groups of 3 including air blast variants. Hey, another reason to stack heavy, and trust me, there are several more reasons to do so. A few crossbow giants that will just one-shot you, Cola scouts trickling in to waste time, and ends off with giant knockback heavies. The third wave has 10 super scouts of random varieties, but this entire wave consists of mini giant spam, particularly these custom bowman snipers that shoot rockets, coupled with Ascension engineers set to teleport behind, and the spam of custom snipers including those that can explosive headshot, and support tanks that drags out the wave after everything dies. Yeah, this mission just continues to get worse, and soldiers and demos will proceed to get fucked on the next wave because it has air blast power supports and engineers appearing with short circuits. Seriously, how privileged was this mission? Why is it allowed to just ignore basically every part of the whole docket? Oh, right. It's because you only needed 1 pass to get into the campaign. Oh, silly me, man. Dude, if any judges today would see this mission, they would strike it immediately. Anyway, this 4th wave has crit spam from the giants, and yet the prior wave only gives you the credits necessary if you earn the bonus. Several heavies that are on expert skill, followed by more knockback heavies with armored vaccinators, which are weirdly denoted with crit borders in the icons, but sure. Then we get our 7th knockback heavy as a chief, that is crit boosted, has a conch buff, and is able to heal per shot. And just like what I said earlier about the previous iteration, they're just a spongy boss that is allowed to stay alive longer than necessary. The final wave will start with 3 tanks spawning simultaneously with different speeds, which I'm not gonna lie, it is a rather interesting way of deploying them. This is the longest wave of the mission, and it's just spam the entire way through. We get sicky spamming demos and giant ray gun soldiers. They didn't even bother to call them giants. More armored vaccinators, except they pocket giant black boxes now, coupled with AT snipers that hit fire. Sure love the amount of hit scan porn. Perfect for how open the map is. And this wave is perfect for a shield medic because the finale brings out a chief flare shotgun pyro named Please Nerf. It burst fires its flare, which is a guaranteed 1 shot. And it heals on hit significantly with a conch buff slapped on. This is the 2nd time the mission brings out a healing boss. Am I playing an expert? Where was the sane and enjoyable parts in this mission? Seriously, compare this to the rest of the experts that we'll cover later, and you'll have to wonder how this mission became a part of the campaign. Autonomous Annihilation is F. Time for Hoovy Dam. Only 1 mission is featured here. Kinetic Energy is a 6-wave advance. The mission overall has some decently varied comms throughout, although the first half tends to be rather spammy. It also has these Coastrock pyros, and we all know how annoying they can be. The mission utilizes the parachute gimmick quite a lot, although that is large in part due to the map itself premiering in this operation. Honestly, it isn't too bad, but there can be a bit of some jankiness to the experience, especially when medics are used since they all can scatter about. Bots in this mission overall are actually pretty decent. They're rather simple, but it should be a good thing because they do allow the subwaves to stand out from one another. One type of custom bot this mission loves to deploy, however, are air charge demos, both as pipe demos and demonized across variations. They start appearing by the midpoint, and it's very obvious that they want to show them off surfing around the 3rd area. They are slightly annoying, but at the same time, they're not too hard to take care of. I do appreciate them being the central identity to this mission, and I do find them rather charming and honestly one of the good qualities of the mission. Aside from that, you do get enforcer spies here and there, and there is a chief contra soldier at one point decorated in samurai gear. The final wave has a lot of air charge demos as giants, having different types of medics pocketing them throughout, but aside from that, not much really happens. It's a rather weak finale to be honest, but once again, the mission is sticking to its identity here, which I do like. Kinetic Energy is A. Now we're moving on over to Isolation, 1 intermediate and 1 advanced. Haphazard Routine is a 6-wave intermediate. Yes, the wave mainly consists of common spam, including these annoying score shot bastards that get used for the first 2 waves. The common spawning from main tend to be squatted, so their featured subways are rather piss easy. However, I will say that there are certain charms to this mission that makes it stand out. Throughout the mission, there are these supports being bison soldiers of several varieties that trickle in every so often. They're not too bad, even considering the fact that some of them do mark and slow you down on hit, which are both the worst variants to come by, but once again, it's a charming aspect. There's a few custom giants, some in the first half that are powers of a few varieties. However, by the midpoint, it does start ending things off with chiefs that adds to the overall repetitiveness, and once again, charm. There's a giant flacker demo on wave 3 that just spams a boatload of grenades but doesn't deal that much damage. Wave 4 has this chief bison soldier that shoots several hit scan lasers instead of the usual projectiles. This one's honestly rather shit considering that it comes squatted with steel gauntlets that have battalions stapled onto them, and perhaps the most annoying one comes with wave 5, being this giant robot head named Lord Suglokonam.
Lord Sulakonam.
Rapid fires much faster the lower its health gets, and I only say that they're annoying solely for the fact that it auto jumps too frequently, making it really hard to deal consistent damage. The final wave doesn't have much to offer, but it is quite weird. You get 2 giant stun soldiers that rapid fire, then a beggar soldiers firing infinitely, then there's a giant medic that comes out shooting people with a Blutsauger, then at the end you get Sir Nukes-a-ton that shoots a lot of nukes out at once. By all means, this mission has problems with its repetitiveness and tedious subways, but there is a level of charm that somehow makes it stand out. Haphazard Routine is C. Snow Blindness is a 6-wave advance. Oh boy, this first wave means that something does happen in this mission, doesn't it? This mission utilizes a lot of custom bots, and many of them are decorated and their names altered to be something related to the mission's title. The pacing is decent and there are actually robots you need to be careful about, but that's as far as I can take it because the bots here do genuinely suck to fight against and are designed for the worst. For example, you get this giant pairing of a Deflector Heater Heavy along with a Chief Gas Power with massively boosted afterburn, up to 28 damage. This mission also has bots sharing the same icon as their standard counterparts and yet do something different. These include charge soldiers that do double the amount of crit damage, giant flaming pyros that do more damage with just a little extra flame drag thing, these burst fire soldiers that are actually volley soldiers, just with a lesser clip size, just among the many examples of bots that sour the waves here. The finale is just a dual boss wave that starts immediately. The soldier, named Sergeant Skybox, blasts you up into the air, while the heavy named Captain Crater is a Natasha Grappler Heavy that applies negative knockback. If these two weren't anal enough, the wave also periodically sends a mini giant airstrike soldier with rocket specialist that is able to flank around to the hatch and come back. If it wasn't clear enough, the mission suffers quite a lot from the sheer amount of custom bots designed for the worst, but generally speaking, it's not the worst I've played. Snow Blindness is D. Up next is Kelly, and with his premiere map comes only 1 mission. Homestead Happenings is a 5-wave advance. Now much like the prior mission, it does have custom boss with stat changes where you least expect it. The giant bowman probably shouldn't have an extra 25% damage, bleed on hit, as well as penetrate players, but not too shabby of an introduction. Surely the mission will take a turn for the oh yes it does. Now to give credit, the mission does actually become more interesting as it goes on. It starts utilizing the map's UFOs as not only a set piece, but also a way of spawning additional robots from the saucer that floats above the front. The boss later on will actually start looking more alien, with those being controlled by tiny green slugs on their heads, as well as others having the Corona cosmetic. Considering the fact that this is the only mission on this map, and a premiere one at that, it does get a few bonus points for standing out visually in this campaign. But then here comes that custom bot issue. As if the hidden stat changes weren't enough, the mission on its last 2 waves will start deploying these custom snipers that are extremely dog shit. They don't do much damage, but holy shit are they completely insufferable with their constant camera punches. The mission also proceeds to escalate its difficulty beyond hard advance and starts becoming expert. A lot of spam gets pushed out further as the more frustrating custom bot designs get utilized. This wave 4, for instance, ends with common bowman that gets these extra buffs for whatever reason, and it also has this atrocious giant pyro with its flamethrower having an insane amount of reach. The final wave has a 5-minute timer for some reason. It also never takes down like any other timer bot, so you just have to know from the announcer's voice line what time it is. This finale is rather boring point compared to the rest of the mission. It initially has direct hit spam along with a few giant scatterguns, followed by reflex powers with Ubers alongside giant deflectors, more volley soldiers, only to cap things off with giant mine layer demos pocketed by giant Ubers. I guess I was expecting a boss at this point, considering how hard the mission went by the midpoint, but the timer here really just wasn't all that. Once again, I do appreciate the set piece and mission design around, but the bots here, I mean, Jesus, they really did make this mission unironically harder than the experts. Homestead Happenings is B. Alright, now that was the 49th mission of Madness. Unfortunately, we're gonna have to stop here for now, but I will definitely finish the second half of the roster on the third and last video of this operation. If you would like to stay tuned for whenever that drops, then subscribe, probably. Anyway, thank you for watching up to this point, and I'll see you on the next one.